ELI 5. Why does food need to be cooled to room temperature before refrigeration? It doesn't. And in fact, it shouldn't. For food safety reasons, food should be cooled quickly, and refrigeration is generally the best way to do that. People who cool things on the counter before putting them in the fridge are usually concerned about making their refrigerator work too hard or raising the temp of things they already have in the fridge. Can't speak to the validity of these concerns in each person's own kitchen, but food safety best practices mandate rapid refrigeration rather than countercooling. I was told it goes back to the days when a refrigerator was literally an icebox, with actual ice keeping things cool. The hot food would speed up the melting of the ice. I have no cite for this. Generally speaking, it doesn't, and you should endeavor to get your food into the fridge as soon as possible. A strong exception exists when you're dealing with large quantities of hot foods, like a pot of soup, chili, or hot jam. In this case, there's a lot of thermal mass, so it could raise the temperature inside the fridge so far that you risk bacterial growth on the food that's already there. A weaker exception is that if you close up a container of food, you might experience condensation on the lid, which could alter the food's texture later. That is a holdover statement from when we had actual iceboxes. Less heat transfer would make the ice last longer is the logic. Since the modern refrigerator has been common use, you don't need to let it cool at all. The heat transfer in the fridge will go faster the more drastic the change in temperature, so the food will be in the danger zone for a much shorter time if you put it directly in the fridge. Okay, I do this, but it depends on the food tbh. It's not to protect other foods in the fridge. For me, it's about making sure you are not trapping moisture into the item you are refrigerating. The bigger the difference in temp, the more moisture condensation that will develop inside the container, making the food get soggy. Reading through these comments makes me think that most of the people I know that complain about chronic IBS or are constantly sick with stomach bugs are just really bad at food safety. WTF is wrong with people? You should not cool food to room temperature before refrigerating. The only time you should delay refrigeration is if you have enough food and it's hot enough that you risk heating up the inside of your refrigerator and the other food in there. E.g., a gallon of soup should be cooled a bit before refrigerating. But a couple bowls, or leftovers, should go in refrigerator ASAP. Ideally, no food spends any time at room temperature, and anything more than a couple hours at room temp should be considered a food safety risk. It doesn't need to be. Depending on how much you are putting in, separate it into smaller containers and put it straight into the fridge. You don't want to put a large amount of boiling hot food straight into the fridge, as you can overwork your fridge, potentially damage it. It will also heat up all the other food in the fridge. The only reason to let it cool before putting in fridge is condensation in the container. If you put it in cool, it will stay dry. Put it in hot and you will drops of water on the lid of the container. Not really a big deal. And waiting does give more time for bacteria to grow. I believe it's because if you were to put a large pot of soup in your home fridge, it would higher the overall temp of the fridge and put everything else at risk, as well as not cooling the pot of soup fast enough. In restaurant kitchens, we have massive fridges, so putting in any hot food doesn't really increase the temp of the fridge. As others have also said, putting it in shallow pans to increase the surface area getting cooled. Never heard about it? WTF? Old kitchen myth sparked by the belief that the heated food makes your fridge work harder. Don't leave it out, bacteria love it. And you, when they have the chance. After we eat, I package the food into containers and throw them in the freezer on top of ice packs. I make ice baths in the sink for large pots of food if I don't have enough containers for and stir the pot every 5 minutes until the pot is cooled down. I have a regular fridge with the freezer on top, so it is empty for the purpose of cooling food quickly and holding ice. All the frozen food goes in the deep freezer. I've just always thought of waiting till the food stops. You can put it in a modern fridge. One thing I'm not seeing mentioned here is that hot food cools the fastest when it's steaming. If you let it sit out for a bit to steam, it will cool down a lot faster than if you cover it and put it in the fridge freezer. For a fast cool down, portion out hot food out. If it's steaming, let it sit out until it stops steaming. Then cover and put into the fridge. News to me. I put food in fridge when it suits me. Fridge and food figure it out. Humans fuss over the wrong things. I'm not a science person, but I was always told to let things cool on the counter before putting them in the fridge, because if you put them in hot, they heat up the other things in the fridge before they get to cool down. That makes the fridge work harder, and until the fridge cools everything down again, it spreads the warmth that can make other things in the fridge spoil faster. Putting something very hot in the refrigerator will heat up everything else in the fridge that's nearby while it cools down, possibly bringing other food up to a dangerous temperature for a long enough time to let bacteria start growing. It also causes your fridge to work harder than necessary to cool your food. If you're talking in a sealed container, it's because of the difference in volume between cold and cold food. You'd think this isn't really important, but I've seen buckled Tupperware. The main reason people say not to do it is the heat or adds to the fridge. I let things cool a bit, but not all the way down to room temperature. It's hilarious that this has been downvoted. A lot of comments that this is false. But actually it is recommended to save energy. Putting something hot inside your fridge will make it heat up and increase electricity usage. Cooling it down towards room temperature saves a lot of energy. It's all boiled and sufficiently heated anyway, so couple hours outside the fridge won't make it go bad faster. It's one of those things from the old days. Currently refrigerators are way better, so it's no longer an issue unless you put a huge container. With extremely hot food, everything should be fine. What makes you think that? Who told you to do that? It shouldn't, because as others have said, it allows it to be in the temp danger range for longer. The reason it often is, and why a lot of people tell you it should, is because if it's too hot, it can warm up the fridge and thaw out or warm up foods that need to remain cold. However, there are ways to get around this. Deferring to fridge manufacturers and food safety professionals on this one. I am neither. It doesn't. It's a leftover practice from the days of iceboxes. Putting something hot in an icebox raises the temperature, causing the ice to melt faster and the other food to spoil. It's actually not a good idea to let the food cool to room temperature, because that's when bacteria will flourish. If the food is either hot or cold, the bacteria is kept at bay. So you want the food to go from hot to cold as quickly as possible. It doesn't. It only needs to be cooled before being frozen. And you achieve that by putting it in the fridge. Once it's fridge cooled, it goes in the freezer. Leave it in room temperature environments for the smallest amount of time possible. My ex-husband got so sick all the time from eating food that he'd left on the bench to cool like that. His mother always did it, so he did it too. When I realized what he was doing, I set him straight and the sicknesses stopped. It's a myth designed by the I'm not paying to air condition the outside dads to save electricity. It doesn't. In fact, that's the most dangerous temperature range for food, is when it's cooling down to room temp. The safest thing to do is to immediately put it in a freezer or a refrigerator.